Alright, so after a whole lot of crawling under the seat, I was able to repin the ignition switch. So that's the clutch switch now. So that means that I can actually test that by putting my key in and try turning it over. If the car won't turn over until I push the clutch in, then it's working correctly. The second thing I've got here now, I just finished pinning the reverse light circuit. So this blue and green wire are pinned into the bulkhead on the interior, and this harness is pinned in on the exterior. This is the part that plugs into the transmission. Now under the dash here, I have to, from the console harness, the blue and green wire that are part of the reverse light circuit, just a switch. It loops underneath the carpet, goes up under the dash, crosses the top of the steering column, ultimately rolls in right in this vicinity underneath here where the fuse box is at. So I have to intercept those wires before they leave, going into the floor space and then to the back, and I'm actually going to cut them, and then I'm going to solder them into the joints here, so then the new switch end will be from the transmission side, which is what I have to have in order for the reverse lights to work, as the switch again is on the trans. Let's see if the car is going to operate correctly with this switch for the clutch. The buzzer works, so that's a good sound. Nothing happens. Clutch in. Perfect. So that's the pigtail for the trans. It's hardwired into the bulkhead. I just have it sitting there now. We can test these reverse lights to make sure they're functioning okay. What you do is turn the ignition on, and if you've got power across those terminals on that pigtail, you short them out, closing the switch, and the reverse light should come on. Let's see if it works. So at this point, I have the trans mount loose for the automatic. Drive shaft has been pulled, console's been yanked apart, and the wiring has been redone to accommodate the manual transmission. Back at it, and tonight's goal is going to be draining coolant, oil, removing radiator and the grill and the headlight bezels, and further prepping for the engine removal. Gonna pull the battery out now once I drain the fluids, because that's the last it needs to do anything. We confirmed the electrical's functioning as it should be with the mods that have been done, so let's get to draining. Alrighty, well, we've got the rod out and the coolant drained, and currently the engine oil is draining into the pan under there. I pulled off the fuel line, and I'm gonna start going around. The battery's disconnected naturally. Throttle cable comes off next, and I'm basically gonna start disconnecting the exhaust, and we're gonna get this motor as ready as we can to pull. Okay, well, I think I'm at a point here where I'm gonna call it again for the evening. So the harness is all disconnected from the body of the car. That means that the harness is gonna stay with the engine when it comes out. That's gonna be a lot easier to clean at that point, and then I can take care of under the hood stuff. Okay, well, I'm guilty of not showing you guys the last day and a half or so of stuff I did, but you'll see I made a little bit of progress here on Marcy. Trans and engine are out, so I did split the trans before I pulled it out. It made my life a lot easier just to have access to everything and to pull it out and keep the car intact without breaking anything. It was a little tricky to get to some of the bolts buried up in the top, but got it out, and I have my a pile of collection of Chevette parts now. There's 3 engines here. There's 1 automatic transmission, and if we look in the back, we got another automatic transmission. There's a manual behind the trailer there, and yeah, I have a problem, I suppose. Speaking of problems, the front cradle on this car that I've been driving has some pretty bad spots that I didn't see. Now, I didn't see them until I was really diving into it, taking stuff apart. That's when I noticed, and it's the driver's side that's really bad. So, the solution here, which adds more time to this project, but it's got to happen. I'm going to take the cradle out of this car, which I've since deemed the Red Dragon, and earlier this afternoon I pulled the motor out of the Red Dragon. So This is the cradle that I need to remove the remainder of the way, clean it off, and strip it. I just want the center cradle portion of it. I do not want the upper or lower control arms, and I also don't want the steering rack. Well, there's the engine cradle. I pulled off the busted engine mount, and I pulled out the spring on this side here, because this side here is going to need some work. You can see there's a little bit of a peephole there. Definitely shouldn't be like that. So all of this is going to have to get dealt with before it gets installed on the car and painted and ready. It's one of those things where, yes, it's going to drag this project out longer, but right now is the time to do it, because it's not easy later. This part of the cradle, once it's installed in the car, you have zero access to it from the backside. It rests against the body of the car, so this is the side obviously that needs some loving, but I have to be mindful because this rests against the undercarriage. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So that's the this is the frame mount where that engine cradle actually bolts into. So you can imagine how stuff just sort of gets up there and sits. Like, this is dirt from the road, so it's no surprise that it's rusted out there. Anyway, I'm going to build it back up and make it okay. After power washing under the hood, knocked off some more of the undercoating and the grease and stuff. It's not bad. It's still dirty, but it's way better than it was. Then I started pulling out the bolts that actually land the cradle to the chassis here. Popped the lower ball joints without any damage, just a little tap. That's, I guess, what new stuff will do for you. Found that this spring on this side had a break in the bottom of it. Right in the last coil there. You can see the sheared off piece here. So I didn't lose too much, but I guess that answers my question. I'm probably just going to cut the springs now because what's the difference at this point in time? Let's see here. What else? The rear lower control arm bolts. Pulled those right out. Didn't take much effort at all, but they were greased. They were anti-seized, and they've been covered for the last 2 years they've been in there. So this side, same story. Got it popped out. Just haven't taken out the big 3/4 bolts yet, but it's getting late. Too late to want to run the impact gun anymore because it's so noisy. So tomorrow, I should be able to find my way around to taking out the through bolts that are part of the cradle right underneath the engine mount. You can see that one there. The head's cleaned off. Same story here. Those will be the next two that I tackle. And if I have to cut those out, I can, because I did on the last car and just drove them out with a punch. It was actually pretty easy. Then once I've got this cradle out, then I can knock off my control arms, which shouldn't be much effort again because they should all be clean and ready to rock. And I can take this steering rack, these spindles, these rotors, upper lower control arms, and transplant them onto the other cradle, which is in the process of being repaired. So yeah, good progress. I'd say I'm happy with this. Without with a little bit of luck, I'll have the cradle back in just a couple days here. The new cradle. Right on. I'm out for the night. See ya.